praising this Ney Payasam, saying that, it's so splendid, it's so brilliant, and the children don't know what is actually coming. They don't know they don't know about the death of their mother. So yeah. So there's this one line which says, they started eating the payasam. He sat motionless, watching them. We only want payasam. It's very tasty. Yes, mother has made splendid nehi payasam, Rajan said happily. So, with this comment concerning the food, the boy expresses his love for his mother and appreciation for her making their favorite food. Sadly, is unaware of the importance of this payasam, which is the last thing the mother will have ever made for them. They will never be able to eat her cooking again. So at the end of the story, the father is no longer able to hold in his tears when he feeds the children the payasam and they are, complimenting it. He rushes to the bathroom and he cries. I feel like this is also a big deal. Like, this one particular part of the story is a big deal because men are often shown to be like strong, and they are, like, they are not supposed to cry because it's seen as a sign of emotional weakness. And I think the idea that, he has to go somewhere else to cry because he can't cry in front of his children is something that our society has ingrained in our minds, that, men are not supposed to show weakness, men are not supposed to be like this, men are not supposed to be like that, otherwise it makes them less of a man, which is, I think, something that we have to start dealing with, and also, kind of accept now. And the fact that showing your emotions doesn't make you any less of a man, it doesn't make you weaker, and the fact and it doesn't make you, and it's actually very putting yourself in that vulnerable spot, and accepting your emotions, and letting yourself be whatever scrutinized by society. I think that is a very strong thing to do. And I think men should be taught to be, doing that instead of like hiding what they feel, and like having to like go to another place to actually feel what they are feeling. So yeah, that is the story Nei Paisam. And yeah, so I hope I could like aptly describe it.
Thank you, Anindita. I would also like to add that this story also reflects on the contemporary time. So, if our mothers sometimes get sick, so
Yeah,
how are they treated at home? Nobody takes care of their food. Nobody
yeah,
takes care if she has eaten something, taken her medicines, or nobody offers her anything. It's the daughter, right? Like if
yeah.
mother is sick, my brother does nothing. I have to go and ask my mother, did you eat? Did you have medicine? So and
It's the
then
same but matter.
yeah, it's the ego, and always they want, कि, okay, ठीक है, mama बीमार है, but then who's the next one who's going to take care of us? It's the sister. So she comes into the picture. What if the sister is ill? So they would probably feel victimized. So now you're not getting food on time. You're not getting this on time. This is not fair, mama. Why did you get sick? As if she got sick because she wanted to get sick. So one thing I tell my mother to do when something like this happens, and when my brother is creeping on my father, I tell her to go sick. Just act as if you're sick. And then they will feel victimized, and then they will try to gauge this, okay, where are we without the mother? So this is how I deal with them, or I ask my mother to deal with this situation.
Yeah, I think it happens in like pretty much every house that I personally know. It's I don't know, I think like I don't know, I think it's the male ego that they have, and like, oh, why am I supposed to do this, or why am I supposed to do that? This is not what I've been taught my entire life, so why am I supposed to do it now? So I think that comes into play here a lot. Because even at home for me, when my if my mom is sick, my brother is just like, oh shit, now abhi mujhe khana kaun khilane wala hai? And I'm just like, Why can't you just go to the kitchen, take a
Where
plate
is the
of food
father
and eat?
then? And where is the father then? Why can't he take care of the food of the children at
Exactly,
that point?
exactly.
He doesn't do that.
And there's this whole idea that, it is wrong for a man to be doing all of these chores in the house and like go through with all of this stuff. So I feel like that is something that really needs to change now.
Right, right. Thank you, Anandita.
Did
So,
you, Anandita, did you read this story in Malayalam first?
No,
like,
no, no, I did not. I can't read
In the
Malayalam. I'm
translation?
actually Telugu. I'm Telugu, so
Okay.
I can't read Malayalam, but I
Oh,
read it.
okay, okay,
Yeah,
okay, okay.
yeah,
No, it was nice to hear all these point of views, and it's very relatable. It's a very
yeah,
simple story actually.
yeah.
So yeah,
Okay, okay. So the next reader now.
Should I start?
yeah. Hi, Anushka.
Hi guys. My name is Anushka, and I'm from the same college as Anandita, MSU, and I'm studying sculpture, and it's my final year of my master's. In fact, Asavri is my batchmate. So I read Kamla Das's story called The Flight. Again, it was written in Malayalam. It was translated by C.K. Muhammad Umair. The entire anthology is called The Kept Woman and Other Stories, and I think that only speaks volumes about how her struggle with how men see women in general. So I'm just going to give you guys a quick summary about The Flight. It's basically told from the point of view of a successful female sculptor, and she lives in a big city. She feels that her work is declining. She also feels depressed because, number one, her works are about the nature and the beauty of nature, and she can't really translate that into her works. She also works with a lot of nude models, so there's a lot of chatter in the art circles about her, you know about her as such dignity. She also feels victimized by her husband, who even though is very successful financially, he's oversexed, as she describes, and he expects her to give her body to him every night. And she knows for a fact that if she fails to do this even for one night, he is going to start looking at other women outside her marriage. So something happens. He gets paralyzed, and he starts depending on her for the money. Of course, she's a very successful sculptor. She makes a lot of money, and this gives her a feeling of pride. Not only that, she actually enjoys her husband being dependent on her, and she feels more secure about her sexuality. She feels that now that he is dependent on her for her money, he will probably not go out looking for sex from other women. However, she still feels depressed. She escapes the city life, and she moves to Kerala, and now she lives with her husband, who is no longer the breadwinner of the family. um, while she is in Kerala, she finds this beautiful house, and she hires a very beautiful 17-year-old nude model. Um, and that seems to rejuvenate her creativity, which she thought she had lost back in the city. But it also rejuvenates her husband's libido. One fine night, she gets up from her bed, she goes to the courtyard of the house, and it's a huge, huge house, a very old mansion. She finds her husband and the nudist uh, in a very, very violent coitus position. And I think the way she has described it is something that is very primal, very animalistic. And I think I'm going to quote that because I really like the way she describes it. She realizes that that she has always been under her husband's thumb, and she just takes off. She leaves her house, she goes to the beach that is right next to her house, and the entire night she's walking on the beach, and she decides that she's the first thing she's going to do as the sun rises, she's going to flee away from Kerala. And she can already um, imagine the reactions of the nudist, of her husband, who will be looking in the morning, searching throughout the house for her. And it gives her pleasure knowing that even though her husband doesn't love her clearly, he will still be looking for her. At least that much he will do for her. So that was the story. I will quote these two this one line and this one paragraph that I really liked. She says, this is after her husband got paralyzed and she became the breadwinner of the house. Um, as I was the breadwinner, I secretly despised his dependence and at the same time desired its permanence. I knew that he would need me only when he was living in luxury with no anxiety for the future, sucking my blood like a bug. He didn't even pretend to adore me when he had this job. So her husband was the kind of man who expected her to look beautiful all the time for him, and offer herself to him for sex. Uh, she does, of course, she is insecure about her sexuality for the same reason, but she realizes that now that she's the breadwinner, she holds the cards. And yet she has this feeling of resentment against her husband for very obvious reasons. I'm going to quote another paragraph now, um, that describes the how she finds out when her husband and the nudist are having sex. Um, right. So she wakes up in the middle of the night. She goes to the veranda and, carrying an electric torch, I searched for my husband in every room. Finally, I was shocked to discover him making love to Sri Devi in the moonlight on the corridor outside the kitchen. Both displayed the facial expressions and muscular spasms of creatures in agony, and that characteristic tension which race horses feel at the end of the race. One moment, and I fled from the corridor. I felt that I had accidentally witnessed some primitive ritual. This is another scene that I thought was quite. It wasn't very descriptive, but it did a very good job of describing her feelings and the process of coitus that she found her husband and the nudist in. Any comments?
Am I able to put my comment over here?
Chaturi, you can say, you can just talk.
Yeah, because I'm doing the feminist thing. I'm cooking right now.
Of course you are. Yeah.
Yeah, like when I read Flight, see, I'm not like I've read it before, but it was like mm, it's just that at one point, like as artists, like we see that independence, that she's searching for the independent role. I'm so sorry, the train. I live near the railway station. So what I felt about her way of narrating Flight, it's not just about the independent part of a woman, but it is also concerning about beauty and there is this constant dilemma when a woman becomes more and more independent or more and more profound in her life or her character. There is a point that they abandon. She's speaking about that. You know, a sort of a dilemma you have fallen. Like maybe when we the portrait of a woman was supposed to be fragile, to be you know uh, always be under someone. kind of. So when she's being independent, that dilemma of abundance, being abandoned by someone.
Yeah, and also the fact that, hello, am I audible?
Yes, yes, Asavari.
Okay.
Yes.
So also the fact that the the protagonist, this as a sculptor, I mean, she is working in the field of art, and again, she is being objectified in her life. She is just a mere object of sexual pleasure to her husband. So it's a very weird relationship, I feel, which she puts the protagonist into. You know, this sort of power. What Chaturi was talking about, power, and I don't know, this feeling of flying away to just highlight the fact that she's worth. That struck a chord. Matlab. Yeah, that
Yeah,
was what I felt after listening to. I haven't read the story,
yeah.
but yeah,
And I felt in the end, when the sun was setting, the rising sun, I don't think she's talking about that she's actually going to take the flight or the freedom. I felt it was like, um, she has hope that he would come back, because this is what happens with women. We are bound with the idea of flight, the idea of freedom. We believe we cannot take it. I feel that she's talking about it. Maybe we are seeing the rising, the sun, we see it in the horizon, but I don't think she's thinking. Maybe it's a momentary thing that she's free from everything. Maybe it's a momentary thing that she's doing, running in the beach. I think it's a momentary flight, and
yeah,
we are
On
walking
Yeah.
into something. Yeah.
So after what I read, I honestly thought that it wasn't a momentary thing. She relocates to Kerala and she falls in love with the house. In fact, she describes it with much beauty. She says that this house has waited for me for years in my dreams, and now I have it. But in the end, she's even ready to part with the house because, and she says that explicitly in her text, that she's ready to part with the house because she can no longer love anything over there anymore, and she has lost all her connections with the place. And I think in the end she does get tired of being objectified by her husband, um, and feeling
yeah. I
lonely in
I
her
think
marriage.
being objectified, Anushka, was like a very important aspect in the story. And her own dilemma with it.
Yeah, definitely. I think apart from that, the story already starts on a note that is a little gloomy. She is already tired with a lot of things in her life, and the way she relocates from the city to Kerala, it's almost as if she's running away from it. Maybe that could also be the reason that this could be another reason that Kamala Das called it the flight. But I think the in the end, when she finally decides to leave the house and leave her husband, I don't think it's a momentary thing, because I feel that she's always been running away from things, and now it's time for her to face the realities.
I would like to add that I haven't read the story, but is there a point where the husband, cheats on her after she becomes independent? So this also talks about the idea that an independent woman becomes less sexually active, because, as Chaturi said, sexually attractive to the man. I mean, as Chaturi said, that there is certain criteria which attracts men. Like,
Mm.
she walks, talks in a very feminine way. So if she's not doing that, if she's becoming independent, And if has the agency over him, so of course the man thinks that she's now less sexually attractive. On the other hand, the other woman that he is sleeping with, in the end of the story, she is a nude model. She is a beautiful woman, right? So she becomes I mean, it's the objectification of certain traits that a woman has to possess to be
Hmm.
sexually likable by a man. So that's what I felt while Anushka narrated this. But I'm not sure when the husband actually loses interest in having sex with her
Uh,
and going.
I
act-
I
Actually,
want
the
to put, sorry,
hello.
sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so actually, I since I read it, it's actually not like that. Her husband, even when she starts working, he actually expresses a deeper interest in her, and he tells her that, you look way more beautiful now that you've started working, and you look so beautiful when you're chiseling the sculptures. So it's not like he has lost his libido. I think part of it could be that she doesn't have the time. She is a very celebrated sculptor. She's the breadwinner. Secondly, I think it's just in his nature, because this is an insecurity that she has, that Kamala Das has addressed through her protagonist from the very first paragraph. So I think it's just talking about the kind of man he is, and not about. And it's not related to the fact that, now the protagonist is a breadwinner and before she wasn't.
uh, can I make a point? When you read Flight, there are like certain instances in the beginning of the story itself that I felt like when we're reading it, like I just, because I read all of them, I'm just telling. So that there is an instance that she's already had taken flights in from the beginning of the story. She moved to Kerala. Look at her life. There was a period of her life where she was dependent, co-dependent to her husband. She was beneath him. I mean, not pointed out, but yet. And then she took a flight being a breadwinner because of the situation. And then again, she took a flight from the place that she was already inhabited to Kerala. Maybe for whatever reasons, again, it's another flight. From her Monday life, she wanted difference. She wanted to change the pattern of her life, because this is what we do. Women, I don't think not only women. I think people who goes through trauma, who goes through certain aspects in their life, they always take this flight. And I felt there is that it's kind of an escapist. Like it's like fight or flight condition of human beings or animals or you can say that. So she takes another flight from the predator, the prey, the flight. So I felt it was like so many layers. I told once Asavari, when you read Kamala Das, it's like you dropped a pebble in a well, and you don't know when it hit the ground, because there's not even a sound. Because it for me, her writing is like that. In the story, I mean, in the story of Flight, there are so many aspects she's talking about, so many sensitive points. Bringing a 17-year-old girl, why do we bring a person to an artist, choose her? Why did she choose her as a sculptor? What is there she's searching for? Maybe her youth, maybe the beauty that is lost, maybe the beauty that her husband is looking at, or looking forward, that she doesn't have, and she's bringing it into her sculptures. So I was imagining all those things, because this is what happens. Like I was thinking on those aspects, that these small points of changes and situations and escaping of flights that she's taking at different points. It is not the beginning and the end, and you see, okay, tada, she's finally found the freedom. But there are like aspects, multiple aspects that she's finding. So
Can I also add something? Hello.
अरे बिल्कुल बिल्कुल.
Hi everyone. So okay, I'll confess.
Hi Janvi, how are you?
I'm good, Asawri. Thank you. Okay, so I'll confess that I have not read all these stories, but from what I read and I've been hearing from all of you, I think now that like I sense that the writing of Kamala Das is something that you can't. It's not an armchair writing where we think that the story concludes or settles at a point. It doesn't. It's a very transitive writing, and something which is very lifelike, because the dilemmas of not being able to cope with what is being given to you and what you're looking for. So I think it's really liminal and inconclusive in a way to really arrive at a conclusion that or maybe to arrive at a conclusive character of the in the story. It's very liminal. It's like I don't know, real life. Like that's what I want to say.
Yes, I agree with you. I mean, there are so many layers to it. There are so many interpretations from the same story itself. Like, it's actually that's the way she's weaving everything together. No, it is very
Yeah.
interesting. So if and it is very evocative at the same time. So if I read the story, then I will come up with a different summary, and you read the story, you will probably but this the it the I think one common thread in the whole thing is that the female protagonist, the kind of female protagonist she brings about, or the kind of
Mm.
feminine things she adds, or those issues she portrays. I think those
Mm.
things are the markers of finding a way through her story. So that is
Yeah.
very and it's true. It yeah.
Mm. And also, I think I
So
go with what Chaturi says, that it's really unsettling, and it's a flight. It's a state of flight. Of leaps from here to there, from there to somewhere else. So I think she's making a point when she's saying that she's leaping from various places, and she is in a state of flight. So, yeah.
Does anybody else want to add something? Those who have not spoken.
I I'll share my the story I wanted to talk about. This is this is something I read like a long time ago, and again I went through it, and I found it very interesting because it reminded me so strongly of Emily Dickinson's poems or Sylvia Plath. I mean, so in this poem specifically, she talks not poem story. In this story specifically, she talks about death. Okay, and that idea because see, Kamla Das, she had this experience with death. I mean, she went through trauma in her life, and her father, I think, passed away. So yeah, and that aspect and the narrative. So I'll just go through it. Like the title of the story is the scent of the bird. Okay, and the beginning only she portrayed that she just moved. She's just moved she's arrived at Calcutta, and there's this advertisement which pops up a whole on the wholesale section that they want someone to work for them. So I'll just read the advertisement. A good looking young lady required to be in charge of a wholesale section. A working knowledge of textile colors and new designs is required. So they wanted an application. Applicants can write their own whatever they want to write about the appointment in their own hand. So then she arrives at that building, and this is very important. She wears a light yellow sari with a white handbag, and she reaches there at 11 a.m. And it's a nice big building, 7-story building. There are 4 elevators there, and the fact that she mentions over here that it's humongous. She describes it, and there was a crowd, okay, and there were like merchants and people, but she did not see a single woman anywhere around. So that anxiety, imagine yourself over there. She did not see a single woman around. She further felt that she ought not to have gone there, ignoring her husband's words. So against that, she goes out searching for a job, right? And one attendant nearby asks her she asks an attendant that on which floor is the textile business. So she wants a job at the textile industry. She asks the person, and the first floor, I think he replies, and she feels awkward. She feels as if the eyes were on her. And again, why did she come at all in the midst of these men drenched in sweat? So that thing she says. And now she comes across different wine shop, then import export and things like that, but she doesn't find the sign for textile industries. And then she comes across this sign, which was hung called dying. Okay. So she's amused by that. Like, how come dying is written? So anyway, she goes because she doesn't want to ask anyone. She wants to go there and ask, like, where is the textile? I'm applying for a job here. So she goes there, and she thinks, in her mind, this question is coming that, they should give me a job. I have a status, I'm educated, I have the experience of the world. So that is there. And suddenly in that room where she reaches, she sees this man sitting down, having a drink and facing at her. Very theatrical. Till now, I felt like, oh my God, who is this? And she's thinking to herself, why did she come into this devil's house? Okay. And then he's asking her, had a nice sleep? And she's like, oh, no, what? I mean, so anyways, he asks her, like, are you thirsty? She says no. She shakes her head. And then she asks her about, I want a job. I'm come here for a job at the textile dyers. And he says that we are not textile dyers. Didn't you read the sign while coming inside? It says dying. So basically, she's like, what? Yeah, I know that, but don't you know dying? We undertake to arrange fine deaths. So basically, there's the death wala mystery, and she's shuddering. She doesn't know what to do. And then the interesting part of it, we don't know whether he's the some yama or some person to take her along with her. We don't know, but he says that the protagonist, secretly wishes for death. Don't you remember that when you were in your hospital bed, you saw this yellow field of flowers and things around, and you saw me? So she, remembered it. She was like, yeah, uh, and then he told her the story. Okay, that part I will read. He went on speaking in a soft voice, devoid of all harshness. Long back in the winter, a bird was stranded in my bedroom, yellowish brown, the color of your sari, and also flapped the glass with its wings. How it struggled, and what became of it? It fell down, tired. I smashed it with the shoe of my foot. And then he asked, do you know what the scent of death is? So she was, she knew death. This lady, she knew death. She had known death all of her life. But she's scared now. She just doesn't want, and she's trying to get away from this place. Right. I mean, it's a lot. She had come for a job. So then he tries to say her, see, if you agree, I will give you everything. Everything will be, you just, but she's scared. She just needs a job. And um he keeps on asking him, have you seen me before? He's like, no. Yeah. And then Yeah. So yeah, he offers a lot. Nothing will be yours any longer. Okay. Then I will redeem you for the sexual offering. You will be turned into nothing, but you will become everything. So he says that, and after that she's like, "नहीं बाबा मुझे नहीं चाहिए, मैं जा रही हूँ इधर से." And she goes, and she doesn't see at the elevator. She doesn't see any person over there. So she's a little odd है थोड़ा सा, but anyway she opens the elevator. She goes in and on किया, and then after a while, you know, it started abruptly, followed by the first sounds of a crash. So she felt she was in the sky and that there was a thunder booming. It was then that she noticed the sign hung inside the elevator, "Out of order, danger." So that's when yeah, and then it ends saying that and then there was only darkness everywhere, clamoring, roaring darkness, and she never had to come out of it again. So we don't know whether, this is my interpretation. I don't know whether she was wishing for death to come, or this is her destiny, or what is it? Like anyway, she cannot move away from the clutches of death and her womanhood, her destiny. So I really found this touching, the story. So yeah, yeah, that was me.
Take time to sink in. 2 seconds to sink in. So there are so many interpretations again. So while you were narrating it, I was like, oh, is this a surrealist work by any chance? Because it was going into all the directions with all these visual symbols of an elevator, of this dying board. So it's like somebody is wishing to go out and work somewhere, and she has very nicely put it into a metaphor that your willingness to work is equal to death. So you are actually approaching your death if you're wishing to kind of go outside your house and work. And you had always had these thoughts that you want to be independent, so your life is already like death. So you wanted to die before also. That means you wanted to work before also. You wanted to step out. Don't you remember you saw these lush fields and again it is going back, and now okay, now she's scared, she doesn't want to, and again she's being thrown into an elevator, right? So I think it has a tone of pessimism to it also, that no matter what you do, you'll always
Extremely.
be here. So that's what I felt about it.
Yeah, I mean, that's what even I got goosebumps after reading the story, because it progressed in a very different manner. I wasn't expecting this to happen. I wasn't expecting what lay ahead. But yeah, and the metaphor, the scent of the bird, the scent of the death, that bird is trying to free herself or whatever it is. I don't want to say with gender, but the bird is trying to free, but it can't, and it falls down. What happens of it? And the bird is same color as a sari. So is it again a connection? Is there again that relation between the bird and the protagonist? So yeah, anybody would like to add in, or recite, like
I
not
think there are a
recite,
lot of other women that we are joined by.
share the summary of the story.
Right. So we have Pahul.
Janvi, you were supposed to.
Yeah, Janvi will do it, but let other people speak also. I was wondering, Asavri, nobody has spoken. So this guys is not a Zoom talk as such. And my brother is playing music, thinking that my professional work is not important. Thinking that okay, she can wait. His music matters more. Anyway, So we have other women also. I mean, we would like you to kind of participate, because this is not a monologue or a Zoom talk where only a few people participate. We want to build a community of women around these sessions that we're going to have. So yeah, I mean, you could introduce yourself and just write a comment. Preeti has raised her hand. Go on, Preeti. You can just unmute and just start speaking.
Hello. Hello, am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Hi, everybody. So my internet connection is a bit like problematic today. I might like go bad my audio. Yeah, sorry for that. I wanted to this story Savari just explained. I never read it before, but yeah, after going through it, like whatever she explained, it was really interesting. And what I felt, my interpretation, listening to it, I kind of felt maybe she is dreaming, or in a parallel universe, like in the way sometimes back of her head stuff goes on, right? And I myself personally experience stuff like this, like maybe any even childhood memories, maybe I don't even think about all of these, but I'll keep getting dreams, and then next morning, and I have this habit of like remembering my dreams every day to the point I don't know why. Yeah, so I even explain some stuff to my friends on if it is some horrible or interesting or whatever. So that is how I interpret it. Maybe like we and then there is this people around us says "Ki you might be thinking about it a lot. That's why you got it in your dream or something. But then that doesn't happen particularly. You might not even think about it. You have not even think about it in years, but then still that will be somewhere within you. So maybe, so I was thinking maybe she is, yeah, whatever the Asawari told, I will agree with that. Ki like maybe she thought about, going out of her way and doing something, work outside, or maybe she looked up to somebody, the woman who works outside, but still there is this scare. She's scared of it. Maybe there is this stories she must have heard. What and all happens to women who tries to go out of this um, their way, like go out of their house and do like. So maybe then that is in her head. Something might happen to me, and even in nowadays world also, like all this rape and all of this like nonsense stuff is happening to women. So maybe those things added together in a metaphorical way, it came like that way to her dream, or maybe that is how she is thinking in the parallel mind. So yeah, that I thought it maybe it will be relatable.
Yes, yes. I mean, definitely there can be many interpretations of this because she keeps it loose, She keeps it loose for you to figure out what you want to think about it. But this thing with death, that you don't want it, but you want it, that tuggle of war is there. And I find it also in Emily Dickinson's poems. She in one of her poems says, that I'm waiting for death will come in a carriage or something, the carriage and take me away, as if death is a friend, to confide in. And I think I'm driving the conversation totally in a different direction, but right, Urja. But I have felt that's why it's a very humanitarian thing actually. If you go to see, not just um, yeah. So yeah, Priti, I mean those things are totally there. The parallel world, and we all wish to be there, right?
So yeah, we can move on to Janvi's story now, and then my story will be there. Or yeah, I didn't inform you guys. We got a gift from Zoom. Now the meeting has been going on from an hour or something, and we didn't get interrupted because it's a gift from them. So we should think that this is what the universe wants: women to have conversations. I mean, that's really cool. I mean, we can now extend. Otherwise, there's this limit to the conversations. Like it's just for 40 minutes, and then we have to switch the meeting. But during the meeting, I got this notification, now you can have the meeting for as long as you want. So go on.
But we still appreciate you, your this effort of yours, Urja. Thank you.
Thank you for being a part of it.
Okay, so I'd like to say first of all, okay, let me introduce myself. So I'm Jahnavi, and I am pursuing a master's degree from University of Hyderabad, and I am what do you say? Yeah, so try to specialize in painting. So I try to paint or do something else. It doesn't matter much.
She is
And
specializing. She is specializing. Don't strive.
so, and I graduated from the Maharaja Sayajirao University, and then I moved to Hyderabad. But I'm in Baroda currently. And I would like to say that this has been very interesting session up till now, and people have been, sharing really great thoughts, and I loved listening to everyone. So okay, so I am not as well prepared as all of who have narrated or spoken up till now, and I would like to bring in a few points before I start. That it's really interesting to mark a few parallels which run across so many stories that we would read or heard from all of us right now, and the one which I will narrate. There are these parallels of where death as a theme constantly reoccurs in our stories, and the aspect of a house of an ancestral home, or of her home in Kerala, keeps on resurfacing in many of her stories. And as Preeti just now said, that there's also a possible interpretation of rendering, of a dream-like rendering in stories. So I think these are some points which I also found are present in the story that I'll be presenting. So the story is called Sedation, and if I want to describe the story in a visual aspect, I would say that it's a kind of a somber painting. It's almost dark, devoid of colors, and like a dream-like sequence where it's difficult to find a chain or a linearity in the narration, because she leaps from present to the past, to imagination of wondering and all. So I think it's a story of desire, of discontent, of reminiscing, of trying to cope up with the various identities such as a mother and the writer, and the dilemma of not being able to be the other one. If you're something else, if you're a mother, it's difficult to assume the identity of writer, and if she's a writer, she has to let go the identity of a mother or a wife. So the story starts, she starts writing. She says that just yesterday I went to the supermarket where a book exhibition was being held, and she writes that I saw tidy women walking out of it carrying neatly wrapped paper bags. So I would like to pull out a word from this for we can refer to it ahead, like in some time. She mentions tidy women coming out of the bookstore. I think it's really important to pay our attention to this word that she writes, and the kind of rendering of how she assumes that the mentioning or bringing in the aspects of maybe sexuality or physicality could prove the opposite of tidiness. I think she's also bringing this comparison. And so she says that women were coming out with their books, but I did not go in even to browse around. But instead, grimly, I walked over to the vegetable counter and bought a kilo of tomatoes because my children love the soup of tomato with a dash of cream. I think this small accumulation of lines very nicely captures the essence of the entire story, where uh, uh, she has a longing to return, to go somewhere, but instead, grimly, she walks away from it. So, yeah, so she says that I don't want to return to the world of books. I don't want to return to the world of words, because words would again beguile me. And I'm kind of happy uh, with the persona that I have taken on currently, that of a mother, that of an ideal housewife. She says that, so then, uh, she suddenly jumps from here and she starts reminiscing that, in my early youth, I could afford to have many servants who took care of the house, who took care of the children. And I would just write. I would write from morning until, after 4 in the afternoon. And later I would go on to the beach to have a walk and see women. And at that time, how the society uh, I don't know, apprehended her, and they pitied her husband that he married such an irresponsible woman who denies to take on the responsibilities of a married wife. And the neighbors were disappointed in her. And then she brings in this idea that women were obsessed with virtue. And but she completely denied these roles that the society had built for her. She said that I didn't learn to embroider. I didn't join Mrs. Deshmukh's cooking classes. I joined Khar Gymkhana, where I would, play tennis and come back walking to my home. And then she says that I did not ever want to be the president of the ladies' club. I only wanted to be an Anna Karina or a Madame Bovary. And she mentions that how beautiful tragedies seemed when one was young and healthy. Um, she so now, after narrating this much, she again sets to talk about a kind of a physical ailment. So I think this also is a parallel to what Anandita read earlier, that just a heart ailment which results in death. So here again she tries to touch upon that. She says that a drought has set in within me. Perhaps it happened soon after they removed my womb. And she says that so she was little too young to be walking around without it. And she says that she needed hormones to cruise through her blood. And so, for the lack of hormones, the doctor prescribed her some estrogen tablets to make up for the for the lack of hormones. And she writes later that the tablets in return affected her heart and gave her a heart attack, and for which the prescribed medicine then resulted in a lack of strength in the muscles. So now she is unable to walk for even a few yards, and it very badly affects her, or she gets tired very easily now. So she says that quite a wreck I have become, thanks to the doctor, who probably got 30% of what my husband paid the surgeon for removing my uterus and appendix, left a scar under my navel for remembrance. She says that, now she's talking about her state, that after the operation, she felt deprived of, desires of, she had no inclination towards sex. And then she confesses that actually she submitted to it only in the hope of having children. I think she's making a mark, in the kind of a purpose that the society has set up for a life of a woman. Um, she says that, so slowly I shrank away from it, and changed from a wife to my husband's sister in a way. And she feels like a virus, which is longing for survival. And now she's trying to look for reasons to be alive. And she says that, earlier I had reasons because my little child needed me. He needed to be bathed and dressed up for the school, and to tell him stories at night. So she was just hanging on by all this time in her life. So now she's saying that, and anyway, it's a like a lifeless state for a writer who has lost writing in one's life. And she feels like she has become a rind, and like a diseased bird, which is molting. So these are all kind of metaphors, I think, which is bringing in, and which also are quite visible in many of her stories. But then she denies. She says that I do not resemble a molting bird. I have no skin trouble, and no unhealthy discharge. Actually, in fact, after bath in the morning, I smell as good as a baby. My husband nibbles my feet and pretends that he wants to eat me. I wish I could smell sinful. I wish I could yearn for a man's touch and lie awake. My virtue seems so infantile. I think of getting myself a good cook and of starting to write again. So again, a kind of hope simmers up in the story that she's trying to go back to writing, and she desires a pair of bangles for her wrists. And she thinks about, she's talking about all the fan mails, or the fan letters that she has been getting over time. But she says that, a bureaucrat from Uttar Pradesh wrote to me after a visit here that my presence electrified him. It was an amorous letter. I would have been happy if he were intelligent. Oh, he was such an idiot. I am fated to dazzle idiots. The brilliant ones keep away from me. They do not approve of the way I tear myself to shreds to feed my readers. My readers have tasted all of me. They have dug their fingers into the hollow where my womb was. They have touched my liver that once had adhesions, and touched my heart and got damaged 7 years ago. They know every hair of my body, every day of my age, every orgasm that I have had. They are my cannibal cousins, the real excuse for my staying, even though the city has staled, and even though the whole world has staled. So I think, now I think she's constantly, okay. Let it be. I'll narrate further. Now she goes on to compare herself with her ancestral home. She says that I visited my ancestral home last year. I found that the trees had crept near. The vegetation was moving in. I am like that house. Death is moving in, taking over. I'm fatigued. Every muscle in my body is fatigued. Yet I wash and cook and clean. I hope the community is satisfied now. Their horrible plans have caught up with me at last. I cannot get the smell of onion out of my hair. My fingernails are short and stained with vegetable parings. My life is like a kitchen sink that is not too clean. I think now towards the end, when we're drawing towards the end, she finally brings up the entire idea of sedation or sedatives. Now she is trying to cope up with how people have what idea people have of her, the close ones like her father and other people in her life. And she says that she heard once that her father blamed the sleeping pills that she used to take or the kind of writing that she did. uh, she says that he said she is sedated. She doesn't know what she's writing, but now she reaffirms. She says that he was wrong. I was out of sedation when I began to write. I rose like I rose like the sun, and all heads turned to the east to look at me. That was being awake. Sedation is this. This is sedation. The smell of cooking sedates me. The chatter of my neighbors, the grocer's voice on the phone, the crackle of the mustard seed in the frying pan. I'm wearing somebody else's skin. I'm buried within the body. If only my husband would realize my predicament, he would let me come back to life again. There would then be laughter and lovely books filled with my happiness coming out of printing presses every year. I think this is how, yeah, so this is how she ends the story with a kind of a hope brimming up that if only, someone hears her predicament or her state, which she hopes from her husband, that only then she would be able to come to life again.
I think there's some connection problem.
Was I audible?
Yeah, you were audible.
10
Yeah, you're
seconds,
there.
you were gone.
Okay.
You just
Okay.
finished the story and you just had a
For
2 minute silence.
not
Okay.
two, like
So
10.
I hope I could, I was able to give a glimpse of this story. I don't know, somehow. Any words, please, please, please
Yeah,
speak.
so oh my god, yeah. I know how it is. Janvi, the story you read again, it is very theatrical. The whole the way she's writing, it's very like confessional. As if like a diary. She's writing. She's
Maybe she's even thinking. She's not even
constantly
writing. She's
bring.
just.
Yeah, it's all going on, and again the death, that thing, it's there. It's coming in. I don't know, like also like she talks about poetry, right? That she used to write poems or something in the yeah, she
Youth.
says
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I just remembered, that Kamla Das had she had once claimed, just like that poetry does not sell in this country. That that dilemma of not being heard, a woman's voice not being heard was always there in her life. No, I felt her life also reflecting in this story a bit, when it comes to all the traumatic experiences this woman undergone. I felt it sort of, um, yeah, there was this, yeah, this was a very touching story. Like my heart is very heavy, towards the end. Um, yeah. So that was there.
Also, I think like what we have been discussing so far about the kind of writing that she is doing, where talking about what.
Janvi, can I interrupt you? Also, I think if I'm not wrong, there's Madame Bovary as well to Anna Karenina. So she's naming two important novels.
Exactly.
Two important.
Yes.
Madame Bovary is also very important, written by Gustave Flaubert. Flaubert, I don't know how you pronounce.
Robert or
So
whatever. Yeah.
yeah, you get it. So that's there. I mean,
Yeah.
she has this great concerns, she has this dreams, this aspirations, but then again she's finds her way back into the sort of structure which is supposed to be there. I think it is a story for most of us, like we find our way
Yes. And I
somehow
think
from here
it's so
and there.
relevant. It's so relevant, especially to the region that we all belong to, to South Asia, or maybe to India
Exactly.
specifically. And then how she compares it with, two important, literary references, not from this region. So I think in a way she renders herself as a version, for the Indian women. And somewhere I read recently that many people, I think, sometimes condemn the kind of writing that Kamala Das did, but some scholar who, I think she writes, I forgot her name, she wrote about the works that her works and whatever she has written. She says that one may observe a kind of lack of consistency in her set of writing. And I think it is in a way also visible in each of her stories. Also in the story that I read, there is a consistency, like lack of consistency and lack of linearity, but I think it's a beautiful element in the story, which makes it very reliable, very relatable, I think, for me, in a way. In the flood of thoughts, there's no linearity, I feel. I relate a lot,
True.
I relate it.
And yeah. And even this mode of writing, this confessional sort of what is happening in the mind, just letting out that inner thoughts and feelings, it is freeing out those repressions, it is freeing out all those things happening around you. You're just reflecting, you're pondering over all those things. And even as a housewife, she says, like, there's this thing that we consider, not we, I there's no we, but there's this notion of housewives being, like not thinking or things. But here Kamala is presenting as a different narrative. She's presenting as the story of her, she's giving us a clear, vivid picture of whatever is happening to her. And sedation. I mean, her husband is saying that she's writing just because she's sedated. I mean, that is
Her
like,
father
I feel
says
like,
that.
okay, her father.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
actually, at that point in the story, she is trying to look herself through other people. So she
Okay.
writes beautifully. Actually, I'll quote a line or two. She says that, just a second. She says, "I am punishing myself for what I have for what I have once done, punishing myself for writing poetry and for living like a poet. I brought disgrace to my family, brought unhappiness and misery. When my father lay dying, I was afraid that he would tell me for the first time how unhappy I made him."
Yeah. And
These are,
it's true. I mean, you said in the beginning, it's a somber picture of the whole. It's true. It's there. Like you can feel, the silence around us. So Urja.
yeah. I think the only sound that the story made was in the end, with the crackling mustard and
Yeah.
the grocer's phone call and the noise of a typical Bombay,
Right.
like
Right.
the sound in even Manto's ocean, like the sea, what do you call, beach encounters and all.
Hmm.
Right. I also felt that she does touches a bit on the LGBTQAI community because the woman here is asexual. Right. She cannot become a mother and
Yeah,
she doesn't feel sexual desire. So indirectly she is
yeah.
touching upon that aspect as well. And in her other writings also she has talked about lesbian relationships as well. And that I think that is pretty interesting because nobody talks about a woman who cannot be a mother. You know, I mean, we all struggle with that. Okay, we don't want to be a mother, but we can be a mother. But what if the other person cannot be a mother in the first place? And all the social pressure that comes along with it. So you could not be a mother. Now you're choosing an unconventional career for yourself. Now you're going to write. So the father is like, "Ye to, I mean, she's not fulfilling any duty of a conventional woman." Towards the end, I mean, he's like, "You are always sedated. Like you are a drug addict or something. You can't write without drugs." I mean, I think that is something that goes on with some certain women who choose unconventional careers as well and talk about their sexuality so openly. And I wish Chaturi would have been here because her work is very bold. She delves on her sexuality so much and she faces so much of a criticism in her society where she belongs for the kind of work she does. She is not invited into the art circles because of the boldness of her work, you know. So all of these things that happen, so we are studying her right now because we understand, but there have been so many critiques of Kamala Das's works and so many people have spoken against her, and her life was full of controversies.
Yeah, I mean, of course, a life will be full of controversies, and it is a good thing in a way that there is critique. The I think she was being criticized because she was unapologetic about whatever she was doing, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
I think, yeah, Urja, you made a beautiful point. I mean, I wanted to, touch upon that. There's such a tension in the story between this idea of, sexuality and also asexuality, where on one hand she almost, gets obscene by telling that, the degree to which the readers have, how can I say this? But um, how far they can reach the writer, and it almost gets obscene when she says that they have touched the place where my womb earlier was. And at the same time she also says that she submitted herself to the husband only in the hope of having children. So she's also hinting at this idea of asexuality, of not having the desire anymore after her hysterectomy. And yeah.
But to tell you the truth, I wouldn't know that feeling of feeling like that, because many people don't know whether they're asexual or not. They know you're a woman, you have to get married, you have to have bachas, 2 3 of them, and then संसार करना है अपना अपना, ऐसे क्या बोलते हैं, हाँ वही ना, संसार ऐसा. So that idea is always there, like irrespective of whatever your sexuality is, you have to go through that path which is laid upon you. So, in context to this, I mean, probably asexuality, but also that desire being dead, you know, not being feeling, any sense of pleasure with this, because there's no meaning attributed attached to it. That can be one interpretation, I feel. um, more than I think hundreds of women go through this. Hundreds of women don't know what orgasm is. So it's a sad thing, actually. So yeah.
Right, and also that brings me to a point of consent. And as I think we have talked about it in our earlier discussions on the group, what do you mean by asexuality? I mean, it has a number of layers to it, and I do not want to question that there is a particular sexual orientation, but I think asexuality can be momentary also. So for some period, you do not feel like having sex, no matter what. I mean, you can be sexually active the other month, but you do not feel like having sex. And when you say that to a person or to a partner, how how do you then express that you are not feeling like having sex? So you are in this context, the woman, how would she express? And that comes with a lot of guilt, that you don't want to have sex with a person that comes in. Okay, I am a woman, I am married, and this is my husband. He might go to other places, seek other women, if I am not able to give him sex. So this whole idea of asexuality, even in our everyday lives, this happens with every woman. So we are afraid that if I say no, will he go to somebody else? This is not accepted as a normal, which I think this story also kind of hints on. Not just her who, just not just her, by the virtue of her biological self, that is removal of a uterus, but even those who have a uterus can sometimes not feel like having sex. Then what? You know, that is something that came to my mind. So should we go on to my story? And we have other people who have stayed. Like, thank you for staying, guys. I feel so happy that certain people have stayed for so long. So should I go to my other story, or is everybody tired? Like, this is the last story of the session, so I'll just briefly talk about it. I won't go into the details, because this is the first story, and this is a bit I can't say it's light, because none of our works are light, but yeah. So this is a story of a young married middle class woman who is attracted to an older man. So this woman got married at a very early age, the age of 15, which I think resonates with Kamala Das's life as well, because she got married at the age of 15. And so it felt almost like a confession, as we have been talking about. It seems like maybe she's talking about herself when, when she might be in her teenage, somewhere in, or maybe in her early 20s, uh, so that is where the story is based. So in all the other stories, I think the woman was a bit like older or something, but this is a young girl. This is a very young girl. And the story begins with she sitting in a theater watching a movie that stars Elvis Presley. So while she sees him, she's no longer attracted to the youth of him. And as compared to the other women around, the young girls of her age, who are, chatting and laughing, she ponders, have I cast out my youth as well in loving this older man? So she thinks about her, she ponders about her everyday life ki, I apply face cream to ward off pimples, I wear silk saris, and she wonders, like, for whose sake am I doing all this? Like, I have everything that a happily married woman would require in this normal world, but she's not happy, and she is attracted to somebody else, and she's married, and that too, he's a much older man. So she remembers the day she first met him through her husband. So this person, this old man, was the husband's friend. She saw him as a man who was not good looking but could be trusted and admired. And so eventually she talks about her desire for this man and how it went beyond his physical appearance. So she got attracted to his voice, she got attracted to uh, his name and his being intellectual, and even his inaccuracies attracted her. And So she also confesses that there was this irrational respect for him that she had. So even if he had yellow teeth, or crooked something teeth from hair, and he had wrinkles on his whole face, and she was still attracted to him. And you can also sense a sort of obsession in her voice when she's talking about this man, almost kind of idealizing that man. And while watching the movie, she's thinking all this. And so while watching the movie, she starts to cry, and she leaves the movie hall and drives the car in front of a house that has an iron bench. And that house is actually, I mean, she doesn't say it directly, but that house, I think, is of that old man who's married, has children and a wife. So there, then she, recalls another instance while sitting on the bench, that the instance that they both had shared when they were in a living room, and they came very close to kissing and almost kissed. But the older man shuddered away and said not to do all this, but he gave in for a second and disturbed. There was certain disturbance in him as well. So it was not like he was not completely against it. He did get attracted to her, but eventually he said, no, no, I can't do this. So, of course, then she came back home and she's like, okay, fine, I'm gonna come back home. And then what happens is that the other day, her husband goes to visit this man, and this older man tells the husband that, this is what your wife is doing. And the husband comes and starts crying, am I not making you happy enough, and why did you do this to me, and all that. And eventually I would just like to quote uh, how the story ends, which I found to be very interesting. In front of the mirror, Achala, you poor fool, I told myself, after this day, your eyes will reflect only your own face. Your ears will only hear your own voice. Let this loneliness be your next love. I was amused for some reason at the turn of my thoughts, and my husband came to the door wondering why I had burst into laughter. I shall not tell him why I laughed. So this is how the story ends, right? So I personally felt that this story, um, I mean, it breaks a lot of stereotypes. And as I was telling the other day to Asavri, this whole act of the old man to go to the husband and tell, "Nee, you see, your wife has been doing that." It's like going to someone's parents and complaining, okay, you see, this is what your kid has been doing behind your back. So yeah, this whole act of that man was a bit problematic for me. This is how I interpret it, that this older man, he gave in for a second. So he had no guilt in putting the whole thing on her, that she was doing it, but they kissed, and that is a fact. But yeah, this is what I felt. And right, and towards the end also, it's like the sleeping pills. So there's a mention of the sleeping pills again and again. I think in the previous story also she mentioned about taking sleeping. She is young, she's very young, and she's taking these sleeping pills. So uh, that resonates with her work so much. Like, event maybe, it is after all confessional, because you see the mention of sleeping pills again in this. So she might be on them, truly might be on them. So this is my interpretation. I think it's a very light story otherwise. I mean, it has many layers, but yeah, comparatively. And also it's the first one in the book, right? So does anybody want to add something to it?
Um,
Both
yeah,
are
so,
muted. Okay, please.
yeah. What was really touching in this story is the ending. I mean, the way it turns out. Like, almost all her stories, I think, her endings like they touch you, like the whole thing you process and it you can feel it down. That she was supposed to end her life with those sleeping pills, correct? She was supposed to do that, and but then I think I have the book, so I can read like just a little. I kept the bottle back on the shelf and went and stood in front of the mirror. Achala, you poor fool, I told myself. After this day, your eyes will reflect only your own face. Your ears will hear only your own voice. Let this loneliness be your next love. So, yeah, I mean, and then my husband came to the door wondering why. I was amused for some reason at the turn of my thoughts had taken. And then the husband comes in and I burst into laughter. I shall not tell him why I had laughed. That point only, that you don't consider it as a mistake. It was your choice and you're living by it. You're not. I mean, that's the fight. And again, I think in the story there is this Mahabharata or no Bhagavad Gita context. That layer is also added about Krishna and Arjun. So Krishna guides Arjun to युद्ध हो रहा है तुम अभी ये वो करो, and like who's gonna guide the Radha perhaps. I'm just like adding things. So yeah, so that's what I felt. The mic is mute, Urja.
Yeah, so towards the end there's also another mention of this Gita thing where where she talks about when a person is about to die, they whoever they're thinking of, or whoever their whoever's voice is in their ear, or everything, so you take the form of the other person in the next life, and she wonders that, okay, I don't want to take the other person's, so this is how this sentence comes ki, I don't want to take the old man's body or voice or anything. Now I am going to take my own voice, my own loneliness. I'm going to look at my face when I look into the mirror, not the man's. So she's kind of standing up for herself at that point, that my life is
This is a
because of this man. Also, I felt there's this layer that she has added.
this is a very hopeful kind of a turn it takes towards the end. Even though it is touching, I
Just like
felt it was,
reclaiming her life, I
yeah,
think.
yeah, reclaiming her own narrative.
Preeti had raised hand.
Hello. Hello.
Yes, Preeti.
Hi. What I would like to point out that what I liked one point about this whole story, like how all of a sudden, just the act of that old person that he had to confess it, or maybe complain it to her husband in a very dramatic way against her, changed the whole situation till now. How it has been explained about him, how he is a very mature person, and what are the aspects she looked up to and why she was attractive, totally fell apart, in the sense like he in this at that only at that moment he became this immature man who couldn't take the responsibility of the act. Even he wasn't to it, and act on it in a mature way. And now everything came on her. But and then she that moment where she last point she explains about that she stopped the action, or she was about to commit suicide, or whatever thought was in her head, and she laughed. So that laugh, I felt ki it's pointing out her maturity there in this part. She being a 15-year-old or that age still, she as a woman, she grew, as a mature person, because and I felt ki there is this part also ki she is trying to hint upon ki um, this in the society, man, if although they commit mistakes, whether it's emotionally or but they always try to put it upon their, whether it's wife or whether it's other women, or and even society is just waiting to grab it also that way and just blame it on her and victimize her. I mean, like sorry, not victimize her, like make her the culprit. So I think this is what also has been shown through this story. How now everything is on her, everybody's eyes on her, and everybody is just gonna judge her. How is she even um, meet her eyes with the husband, and what is she gonna give explanations? Or yeah, so I just wanted to, I wanted to know all of your views also on it.
Right. You're completely right, Preeti. I think this is a story where, you know, it also hints how infidelity, not only infidelity, but attraction towards to an older man, is kind of looked down upon if a woman does it, but somehow it is normalized when the man does it. I mean, in the other stories we read that there was infidelity by the man, but there was no such thing that the woman could express to the man, and oh, you did this, and behave in a very dramatic way. It was very normalized, and she just took a flight. But the man here actually opened his mouth and said, "Why are you doing this to me?" and all that. I mean, yeah, making the woman feel guilty, but the man is not being felt, the man is not feeling guilty about it. Also, I would like to talk about how she got married very early, and I think she lost her father, Kamla Das. So maybe it also, if psychoanalytically we see this story, that her attraction towards an older man can also be seen as seeking for a father figure in her life, which I have personally experienced, because I was attracted to older men for a long time in my life, really old men also. So, it psychoanalytically talks about this absence or neglect by a father figure during the childhood, which I think we could further delve into if we read her story. If we Since you have read it, a bit of it, Asavri, do you think something is coming from there, or it's just me thinking in all directions?
See, I feel that love has no age, and I don't think, like in this case, there was no love or anything. But these ideas we develop, as society, we construct that, हाँ ऐसा ऐसा होना चाहिए. So probably, obviously, yeah, that that Freudian perspective, the psychoanalytic thing could be there. Or I don't know, I don't want to really have a firm stand over what that actually is, because it is very complex in that way. Like we cannot I think Kamala Das doesn't want you to interpret or conclude what is happening, but these interpretations and these connections to the mundane life, the everyday life, is very interesting to note. So yeah, that's what I felt after I read it. That women are being slut shamed. Men can be guys can be players or anything, but women can't. So that, even though we say zamana jo kehna hai kehne do, but still that thing, your that guilt or that consciousness is there. So yeah, that is there. And wow, it has been, I think we crossed almost an hour, I think, right? 2 hours. It has this has been actually quite interesting and fruitful session.
Right. Paola said, after the stories, I was also thinking about her poetry, the suicide poem. And that if love is not to be had, I would be dead. I also read it somewhere that she idealizes, it's
Yes.
autobiography, she idealizes her lovers to a point where it does not resemble their original self. So when she's talking about the old man, saying that, okay, his teeth were good, it was a momentary attraction, I think, for her, but she has exaggerated it. that okay, this is the love of my life, she's crying, and I don't think that her feelings were really so serious about the man. I mean, I do not think it personally, because I have read certain
No,
parts.
no, no, they weren't.
It was in
But
an
that blame, that sort of pointing the finger, and that humiliation is a problem.
right,
That
right.
you're humiliating a person for their choice. So that is, I feel, is no, that's not their right.
An older man is asexual, no, so it's not it's her fault, because the older man does not.
I don't think it's appropriate to joke about.
I mean,
But
I've seen so many older men being pedophiles. Like older men who, उनकी ऐसे, I mean, it's a myth that अच्छा बुड्ढा है तो ठीक होगा, intellectual है तो ठीक होगा. How can he touch another woman or something like that? But I have seen most pedophiles are above 40. Period.
no, of course, of course. But anyway, it has Pahul. I mean, her poems. I told her that I was thinking of reading out her poem. Because the poems, if you go into that, then that's another level only. I think we can sometime, share her poems and talk about it. But considering it's been like more than 2 hours right now, I think we'll have to conclude the occasion.
Right. But last,
Pooja, few words.
Preeti raised hand again, I think. Preeti, please speak.
Oh, Preeti.
No, it's fine. I think we can discuss, yeah, more
No, no,
later.
no. You can. Please, please.
I was just since I was I wanted to continue the conversation you both were having about how like it's only towards the if a woman grows interest towards anybody except her husband, how it has been seen in the society, and how the same thing if a man seeks interest in somebody else, and how society will talk to the wife, oh, why don't you take care of yourself, you might need to boost up your, how do you look, you need to do some makeover, or you need to woo him more, this is all your fault, and so this kind of stereotype mentalities we really need to we need to discuss more. This is why I really like the session, if we can involve more people, and because there are a lot of houses, maybe we all are studying and educated, we are in an educated society and we are studying, but still maybe some people we have same mentality back in our houses, or maybe neighbors or anybody. Even recently I just wanted to mention like that incident happened in UP. We all know about it. So there was this video clip one of my friends shared on Insta, and this guy went right after that incident. It's in Delhi. So he was just random people who was catching on the road, and he was trying to have a conversation. Whose fault is it in that situation? And all these men, they're like all normal people. Even there were a few educated people also, and they're all pointing out it's a girl's fault, or it's a woman's fault, like it's our fault that we need to dress up. And some people are even telling you, why do we even go out, because society is bad. And how that another elderly person talks about how his family's girls are the best for marriage, or they are well treated in their house, because they keep their girls within the house. They are always with chunni and churidar and all of this. So these are all well accepted in the society. So we, as a parent, we should be taking care of our girls like that. And that was so shattering to watch or even listen to. Aren't these also the men a part of that mentality, or based on what these maniac people does all those actions, like they do rape, or in a way these kind of mentality, like our fatherly figures or uncles, all of they also have this kind of mentality. So maybe they're not doing directly some action which comes out to be that devilish or something, but they are also part of their mentality. You know what I'm trying to say? I hope I make sense. Even not only the men of our society, even I have seen older ladies or any motherly figures, they also believe in their son is all okay for them to do anything, whatever they want, whatever time they want to come back or whatever. But then it's wrong for the girls. And only because based on this point, because society is wrong, bad or scary out there. But who are the society? We all are making the society, right? So yeah, so that kind of, I kind of felt there also that elderly person put all the blame on her and every eye is on her. So I kind of felt this is kind of relatable with how the society mentality works. Yeah, that's what I wanted to speak about.
Right. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you, Niyati, Vithushana, and you guys are. I don't know you guys. Can you like? Would you want to speak about the session, how you felt, and maybe we can add you to the group as well. Then we have a WhatsApp group, and we constantly share readings and other stuff on the group.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Niyati. I'm actually Asawari's aunt, and she actually invited me to this chat, and I was just. It's been very interesting, and I actually hanged on, and I wasn't able to leave the chat because it was quite interesting. Quite deep and thoughtful actually. All of you guys are. And as Preeti also, I quite whatever points she has brought up, these points should be discussed, and there could be a lot of maybe suggestions or things how we deal with this kind of a society that we are living, and make us more stronger to and fight for our rights or whatever, and just be what we need to be, just be and yeah, just be basically, and not just it was quite nice actually, good to be with you all.
Thank you so much for being a part of this talk. Vitushna, why don't you introduce yourself a bit so we can all know you a bit? And you can type also. I mean, if you don't want to speak, I mean that's okay. So I think we'll end the meeting, and I've recorded the session. So for anybody who would like to be a part of our group, I mean, most welcome, and I'll add you to the WhatsApp group also. So whoever has invited you, because I'm not sure, like there were a lot of women, so whoever has invited them, maybe they can add them to the group, like Asavari, and if you can add Niyati, and probably everyone can kind of add the women they know, and we can expand the community further, and whoever attends the session, like we can just keep on adding them to the group so that they are informed about the next sessions as well. So thank you everybody for joining the meeting. I think we will be holding the next session in approximately 2 weeks, and then we'll prepare for it, and yeah, hope to see you all again. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being so patient. Bye.
Bye, everyone.